Elon Musk said that he's figuring out how to get to a terawatt of power for AI data centers as fast as possible. This actually reveals his the master plan for Tesla and xAI. Um, so what I say that means is because in order to do this huge goal, and a terawatt of power, people understand is that's how much power the entire United States generates. That we have a terawatt of power plants, coal plants, nuclear plants, hydroelectric dams, solar. That's basically how much the US generates. So saying that they're going to have a terawatt of power, you know, produced and built by one company is basically saying I'm going to build the entire power of the United States, which is a huge goal. And there's many things about it that basically make certain solutions impossible. And there's other innovation that must happen for this. In this picture, we see Tesla bots, the Memphis data center, the Dojo tile in the bottom right corner, the NVIDIA chips, and these mobile natural gas um, generators. The Memphis facility should be able to have 1 gigawatt of power by the end of this year. So basically, one thousandth of what is needed, a million chips. But scaling beyond that is going to be a lot of insane stuff has to happen for that. But if you can do it, you will change the world. Um, so a terawatt of AI, a terawatt is roughly 1 billion AI chips. We have a billion other chips over. We have billions in PCs, because billions of PCs, smartphones, Apple and Samsung together might generate over a billion smartphone chips, but they're using lower amounts of power, right? AI chip is using 1 to, and some soon may have 2 kilowatts of power, 2,000 watts, 1,000, 1,500 watts of power versus only 5 watts for your smartphone. And less energy means less compute, right? So
Right.
gigawatt at the end of the year, they're saying 1 million AI chips here. So it's the first step. So you have the 1,000 times people think, oh, that's so many. 10 doublings is what we're talking about. Okay.
Mhm.
The terawatt path. You have something to comment about that, Randy? Um,
I just I think the only thing is to maybe put it in the context that energy that pretty much everybody's coming on board with this idea. We're seeing it all over and over again. I don't even see liberal commentators questioning it, which is that energy equals wealth.
right.
And in this particular case, what we're talking about is energy turning into compute, the compute turning into both knowledge as well as inference for application of knowledge,
Mhm.
um, and then real world applications like robots. That combination of knowledge, inference, and robotics will give us this
Mhm.
untold wealth, and that
Right.
will basically pulling up the rest of the world behind us
Right.
as we do this.
So, for people who don't know the history of the world and industrialization and civilization, 150 years ago was when we really got into the industrial age, right? So, what does that mean? That means before that period, we got to 1 billion people. It's mostly farming. All the economic growth of basically having more people meant more economy. Everyone was at about $300 per person, right? Everyone was equally poor relatively. Yeah, it's actually some variation where, like Western Europe might have been double, right? But
Right.
in general, everyone was at $300 per person. So the poor people we see in Africa, basically they did not get on board with industrialization. They stayed at that level. But we've gone up 100 times, to 30,000 to $70,000 per capita, right? And that increase in energy that you're talking about, Randy, was basically making the coal industry, the oil industry versus, burning, kerosene or whale fat or whatever we were doing before, right? We scaled up by 100 times. So the wealth of $30,000 per person on average for the world is that 100x increase. And we went from $1 trillion economy to $100 trillion economy, right? So that scale of 100 times increasing in power and the correlation between GDP per kilowatt hour is a very tight correlation. If you have more power, you can be richer. some variation, but basically that you're not talking about being off by, 2 or 4 times on that.
And we sometimes forget how that happens or why that takes place, but it comes down to being able to produce certain kinds of goods like steel, concrete, et cetera, that all require immense amounts of power. Those things then have to be turned into something useful like roads, buildings, cars, trucks, et cetera, airplanes.
Right.
And then you've got simple things like heating, cooling, and cooking, which
Mhm.
go from being overdone to being centralized in your home, easily accessible, and able to turn your life into a life of luxury compared to kings 200 years ago,
Mhm.
because we have all of those capabilities without having to go dig up the dung. I mean, get to the dung, dry it, et cetera, or go get the wood, chop it up, and turn it. All those kinds of things took huge amounts of human power on an individual level, and now you go home and you flip the light switch.
So again, people who don't look at the numbers may not realize when they look at World War II, you see the black and white images there. They have tanks, right? It seems like, hey, the world didn't change that much between World War II and today, right? What did change was that we have 16 times more steel, 16 times more energy. That basically we use more energy in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks than an entire year for the United States before. So even though you see all these tanks and stuff like that and planes, we have scaled up civilization far beyond what was there in World War II. When Nazi Germany was going after Russia's oil, right? One, that was only less than 10% of the world's oil because most of it was the United States, 89% within the United States. So the US industrial production being mobilized for war was what happened in World War II, right? And them going after that oil in the Caucasus, no one thinks, hey, the Caucasus, that's where all the oil is. No, it's in the Middle East and other places, right? And Caucasus, Russia has oil, but it's all over in Siberia. They haven't found that yet, right? So the Caucasus stuff is basically like a few days of oil for us. So again, it's the scale of civilization move forward and to look at the energy wealth and power of civilization. Actually, GDP is a factor that was used to measure military power. It's saying,
Mm.
I'm converting my economy to a military economy, and how much is my potential? My potential is GDP, right? My
Mm.
gross domestic product is how much energy, how much stuff I can make. I go from 2, 3% focused on military during normal times, and then you ramp it up to potentially 50%, right?
Mm.
So that's basically, when you say, if I'm looking at, boxing weight classes of countries, right? That's why China is in the US weight class, because if you convert your entire economy to that, to the purpose of war, then that's what it is. So it's wealth, it's power, it's everything. Okay.
So in the
So
past, in the first and second and third industrial revolution, we were converting that GDP. We were converting to industrialization, steel, concrete, etc. Then we were converting to knowledge-based economy, or information-based economy, knowledge-based economy. Now we're converting into a kind of
AI
uh,
civilization.
AI civilization that not only gives us more knowledge, but also converts that knowledge into robotics and into other kinds of agencies that can
Right.
take the place of humans. Right.
Right. Okay. So let me finish my presentation about that.
Okay.
So AI data center just passed about 10 gigawatts of power. So there's gigawatts and there's gigawatt hours. And so basically if there's, 8,600 or whatever hours in a year, right? So if you have a gigawatt, that can potentially produce 8 terawatts hours of power in a year,
Okay.
right? So people get that, the
Right.
the watts versus watt hours different, right? If I generate power all the time for a full year, 8,000 some hours, that means I scale this up by that 8,000 times, roughly,
Right.
right? So we just passed 10 gigawatts of power earlier this year, right? They have about 50 gigawatts of new AI data centers on the drawing boards being built. That stuff that Meta has been talking about, OpenAI has been talking about in Texas, the new announcements over in Saudi Arabia. Everyone wants that. That's kind of the pipeline of stuff that's going to be built, right? Money probably ready to deploy, to raise. You know, it's everyone's heading that direction. But that's still 20 times less than a terawatt, right?
Right.
So 100 times less versus what the goal is for the top part, all AI data centers in the world passing 10 gigawatts, right? And we're talking about 1,000 gigawatts or one
Right.
terawatt for
Right.
the goal, right? So the goal is huge, and we're heading that way. We're increasing by 5 times, but we still have a long way to go, and there's a lot to it. And I'm going to discuss the challenges of it, what it is. So 4,200 terawatt hours. So if you had 500 nuclear reactors generating power all the time, then that gets you your 4,200 terawatt hours. But we
Mm.
have more production capacity of energy in the coal plant or a natural gas plant, but they don't run all the time like nuclear, right? Because I
Mhm.
gotta put it in there, it's low balancing, it's uneven, and solar runs even less, right? Because cloudy days, nighttime, no power coming out, wind dies down. So those ones are 3 times, 5 times, 10 times less in terms of like hours of electricity,
Mhm.
right? Anyway, 4,200, that's been stable for about 30, 40 years. The US has not increased that number for a long time, just like Europe didn't increase their number of energy, hours of energy produced because, hey, we can just be more efficient. We don't need more energy, all that kind of stuff. Which, just a quick aside, traces back to Nixon and Carter in the 70s, where they both combined to make us 3 times, 4 times poorer than we could have been if we had kept making a lot of energy. We chose not to, and then we transitioned into this we're not making energy thing, and we're just getting more efficient.
Right.
Which, if people understood, this is a choice to make us poorer, right?
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
could have been 3, 4 times richer. But Nixon had a plan to make 1,000 reactors, but then he created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which didn't approve any reactors. Kind of
Right.
tough to make 1,000 if I can't even get, one approved. And then Carter did stuff as well. So we're going to go into that, but basically we stopped, do nothing. China went from 20 times less energy than us now to double our energy level because they didn't say, I'm worried about um, anything else other than becoming richer with energy,
Right.
right? So terawatt generation, that's what we need to get to. And the pace of the AI growth, as fast as AI has been growing, which is faster than the old Moore's Law. Moore's Law was doubling every 2 years,
Mhm.
5 times every year, right? Was what we've been doing for the last 12 years. It was growing into this big part of the economy. Started off as very interesting um, science projects, proving stuff out. But then over 12 years, the models got bigger and bigger. More and more energy and compute and chips went into it. So it was going at roughly 5 times per year. There's some variation between different things going at 4.2 times, 7 times, roughly 5 times per year. But then this last year, XAI and Tesla have transitioned to going to 50 times per year, which people think, well, 5 times per year, 50 times per year. 5 times per year is just a little over 2 doublings, right? Four is 2 doublings.
Two
Five
doublings.
is, well, good,
Two doublings per.
per year,
Okay.
2 doublings per year, which
Okay.
is faster than a
Right.
doubling every 2 years, which was the
Right.
old Moore's Law,
Right.
right? And now 50 times, that's more than 32, a little less than 64. So we're between 5 and 6 doublings per year. So doubling every 2 months, roughly, a little over 2 months, you're doubling. So that means you can get 1,000, over 1,000 improvement in just 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Because they go 30 times 32 times 32, that would be 1,000, right?
Right.
So that's the level we want to get to, which is again challenging for energy, but you can do on compute side. So that is the massive mind-boggling scale. I can do these doubling things in my head. It's something that I think about as a futurist exponential thing all the time. That
Mhm.
getting good at figuring out the doublings lets you get a handle on the exponential world. Okay, so energy, I said, to get to a terawatt, 4 times U.S. natural gas. U.S. natural gas is about 30% of all the U.S. power.
So I'm sorry. So this would be your answer to Elon Musk. This is what you've calculated would be the fastest way to get to
Right,
this number. Not
right,
necessarily the most efficient way, but
right.
the fastest way. Would that be a right way to say?
Fastest and a way to do it.
And a
If
way?
I so if I want to get the energy, I want to double the U.S. energy.
Right.
One way to be, okay, if I scale up natural gas by 4 times,
Okay. Got
I
it.
can do that.
Oh, I'm sorry. These are individual. So 4 times the U.S. natural gas would do it
Yeah, because I
on its
have one
own.
third already.
Okay.
So then if I have 3/3, which is one, 3/3, right? Then 3/3 plus 1/3 is 4/3, 4 times the natural gas, right? I go from
Okay.
one
So,
third
yeah.
of
So
it
I'm
to
just saying, I'm just trying to get straight that each of these individually could do it.
right. Well, I'm only going two things: natural gas and solar and battery. Those are the
Oh,
only
okay. All
two
right.
we're looking at, right?
All right.
Although I'm discussing nuclear, I'm saying
Yeah. Yeah.
why, so the three energy choices are there with a bit of explanation around the scale of what these things are.
Perfect.
Right. So natural gas 4 times, but natural gas, we made, 1,000 miles of pipeline in order to get it out from the ground, move it over, get it to generators and that kind of stuff. That is a lot of work to do that, right? People don't know. It took decades to make all those pipelines and that kind of stuff, right? And then we got to go 4 times as many of all of the pipelines in the United States in order to do that. Plus, you know, staking the ground. There's a bunch of stuff that has to happen logistically to do that. Like when I say 4 times natural gas, it's not like, boom, it happens. Although natural gas is very fast. You can get 10 gigawatts in one spot, which is 10 times bigger than what's in Memphis by doing natural gas. They're using natural gas that's coming by in a pipeline near that facility, right? So that's how they're doing something relatively fast. And getting 10 times bigger, I think is very doable. You can do it in several locations. You can do it in Alberta, Texas, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. There's places you can do this thing. Um, 10 gigawatts-ish, you're really pushing it. Um, is there a place where you can do 100 gigawatts? I'm not sure. It would
Combination
make
of
what?
combination of places. So you and I have talked about this before, where
Mhm.
as opposed to putting all those pipelines in, you could put
Mhm.
the data centers where the gas fields are. So you're
Right,
putting the data center right on the top of the gas field,
right,
and so you don't require the long pipeline creation, which
right,
would make it also faster to get to those resources.
right.
So
But then the chips would not be coherent. They wouldn't be in the same building. I
yeah,
would
I see.
have to communicate across,
Right,
say, hundreds of miles
right,
in order to have, it's like I take my brain and I
right,
spread it around Texas or
right.
spread it around Alberta, right? Yes, I can do it, but it's not quite as good as having one unified brain,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
How much worse that end up being, I'm not sure.
Right. Right.
And then maybe there's ways to make that less,
Hmm.
right? But if you want to have it all in one spot, it's more challenging. You could probably get your 100 gigawatts, maybe even your full terawatt by doing all of the all the multi-location 20 locations in Alberta or 20
Hmm.
locations in Texas where they
Hmm.
have a lot of natural gas resource and you're
Right.
basically taking it all into a massive array of many data centers.
Yeah. In
So
fact, let me back up again because we got to think we want to remind everybody that we're talking about Elon saying he wants to do this himself. He
mhm,
doesn't care what any of these other guys do. He
mhm,
wants Tesla and XAI between them to be this 1 terawatt.
yeah,
Not he doesn't care what Microsoft decides to do.
that's right. That's right. So natural gas is an option. I think definitely can do 10 gigawatts, 100 gigawatts, probably, especially if you do the multi-location thing. Disadvantage of doing multi-location. I think you want it all in one location, ideally.
Right.
Um, but then it would be a monster location. So US has a little less than 2% of its energy from solar power, even though we've been
Mm,
building it for decades, spending all this money. You need to increase it by 50 times in order to get to your terawatt,
mm,
right? And you would need to back it up all with megapacks,
right.
right? Um, Megapacks only last for 4 hours. And so then you have to like double the generation, like in order to like draw the power and whatever. So maybe you need 100 times as much. So I could have the solar powering and then other solar, maybe even 4 or 5 times, other solar powering up the megapacks so they can have a constant level stream. But it'd be, these 8,000 terawatt, 4,000 terawatt hours of power for the solar. And this
Mhm.
solar would, cover roughly the area of Rhode Island in order to do it. So it's quite a bit of land. They have to
Right.
do it. And the megapacks would go into the millions because each one megapack only charges for 4 hours.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't get me through the night. I need like, 12 hours or 16 hours, whatever like that. So that'd be like 4 megapacks going constantly, one after another. A megapack at roughly 4 megawatt hours is about a megawatt per hour. So if I end up needing 20 hours of stuff, I need 5 times the megapacks and that kind of
I
stuff,
see. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
gets you to the million.
Or potentially, do you look for different chemistries for these? Like, what's the name of the company? EOS or something? I forget
Right,
what the name
right.
is. That the
But the
right
thing
name?
is, that many megapacks, when we were talking about like getting to, we're going to get to 20 million cars, 50 million EVs and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which is 50 million times, say 50 kilowatt hour battery packs. So that's 2,500, 2.5 terawatt hours of batteries per year or something. That is more than the lithium we have, right? So you have to go to completely new chemistries in order to do it. And
Got it.
now we're talking about something that's
Additional.
even bigger.
Yeah.
Not like roughly the same time. We're talking about like
Yeah.
10 times, 100 times bigger than this
Yeah.
thing, right? So you have to go to like sodium ion, something that's super duper abundant. Like I'm taking sodium, the salt from the ocean in order to put it has to be abundant material,
Mhm.
right? And so so that kind of thing where, and same thing for solar. Like if I build 50 times more solar, I could be running out of all kinds of like, rare earths and other stuff like that, scaling up
Right.
the mines, right?
Right.
So I run out of stuff quick on
Yeah.
on these things, which
Yeah.
goes to maybe a mix of solutions, right?
Right. Right.
But basically this goes to when Elon says, okay, we need to scale, then the amount that we're making in mines of lithium, not
Right.
enough, right?
Right.
Thus, we must go to another chemistry, not like an optional thing,
Right. Right.
right? Nuclear reactors, 1,000 nuclear reactors would get you your terawatt because the large nuclear reactor is about a gigawatt.
Okay.
That's 10 times more than the US nuclear power plants. US has about like 94 nuclear power plants. The
Okay.
world has 440.
Hmm.
China has 55 or so, and then scaling up, going to add another 150 over 10 years. Um, Adding a bunch of nuclear reactors, the US has been taking 10, 20 years to make one nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
So that has to all change. All these new rules and stuff restricting nuclear would have to get tossed out, which
Right.
this would be a strategic priority so that you would do that.
Right.
But then you have to build a supply chain to do it, either for the old reactors or for the new ones. I think it'd be for new ones. And then you have to scale up, uranium and other stuff like that. There's all kinds of supply chain things around these technology things.
Right.
But, just wanted to, get you the scale. And then when I say blah, along with it, I have, you know, each one I could go 5, 10 minutes about like, and then here's the challenge of doing that, right?
Sure.
But just wanted to, like initially go to that. Oops. Sorry. I scroll down to the wrong spot. Okay. So when I do that, like first for the nuclear, there's a cooling problem. If I can make 1,000 nuclear reactors, dump them all
Right.
in one spot,
Right.
I have to cool that. It's about 1.5 billion gallons per minute to cool a nuclear power plant, right? And then other power plants would also have cooling issues, and the AI data centers have cooling issues. But just to briefly go over the cooling challenges of the nuclear, 1.5 million gallons per minute, that's about 7,000 tons every minute. So several Olympic swimming pools dumping onto the plant. And then when it added up, that's 1.5 billion gallons per minute from 1,000 nuclear reactors.
I
And then
see.
I'm diverting more than one river to do that. Okay. So challenges. And then
Challenging.
also I need to stick it on a spot with stable seismic. because I'm putting
Yeah.
1,000 nuclear reactors in a
One
general
place.
location. There's again security issues around with that. So that's okay. So then then go the chips.
Right.
Uh, NVIDIA only makes 5 million NVIDIA GPUs per year. They went up from
Right.
like 3 million of the H100s last year,
Yeah.
H200s, and now B200, B300 will be about 5 million. And then probably in 2, 3 years, probably 3 years, will double to 10 million. There's things called interposers, which is a layer that's underneath the kind of chip in order to make many chips act like a wafer together. It's
Hmm.
a very advanced thing, and it's tough to scale it. So that's why I can't just flip the switch and make
I see. I see.
all these wafers and all this stuff. And then also another limiting thing is high bandwidth memory. High bandwidth memory is chips with memory that are stacked. I got like 10, 12 layers of memory in order for me to get more memory onto one chip area. So instead of having like 10 a gigabyte of information in a chip, I got like 10 or 20 gigabytes because I stacked thin layers of memory on top of each
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
right? Hard to do, hard to scale,
Hmm.
right? So then that goes to the problem of I want a billion of them. I need to make like 300 million a year over 3 years in order to get to my billion chips or something like that, right? So there are enough silicon wafers to do it. TSMC processes enough silicon wafers, but they are mostly for these older style
Right.
chips and stuff like
Right.
that. And the ones with the really fine lines, down to 1, 2 nanometers versus 20 nanometers. I need to make more of these machines to do it because each um, ASML, the Dutch company that makes those things, each one only processes so many wafers per year, right?
Hmm.
So I need
Hmm.
to scale that up by about 200 times, or
Hmm.
at least um, what 50 times, at least
That
50
would be
times
50 times.
in order to
50
get to the number I need to have, right? And then I need to design a chip that works good enough that does not have supply problems, scaling problems like interposers and high bandwidth memory. Or I need to break through there in order to get to 50 times more chips. So this goes to all the challenges of Elon saying, I must solve making a terawatt um, of this compute
Right.
fast enough, right? And how can I do it? Because it's the energy. How do I do
Right.
it? How do I cool it? How do I put it together? It's the chips. How do I scale by huge numbers? And how do I do all this faster than taking decades to do this
Right.
thing?
Right. Right.
Um, this is where the Memphis facility is, the one that will have 1 million chips inside. They probably have bought some land nearby, the one up above or one below, and
Mm.
doubling the size so they can scale it up and make it bigger. Um, Tennessee Valley Authority is one of the best utilities out there, so they're
Hmm.
giving them more power,
Hmm.
and they're sticking more of the natural gas and stuff there. I think they can get to 3 gigawatts over the next 3 to 5 years. That
Mm.
would be enough to power roughly 3 million chips,
Hmm.
and you can
Hmm.
keep updating the chips in order to have that. Going beyond that, maybe you can get more natural gas over there, run a small pipeline, or have some other generation nearby, run the power lines over there, maybe get to 10 gigawatts. And then there's other locations I think can do 10 gigawatts, with pure natural gas. So that scaling can happen relatively straightforward, not straining things too much, but you are pushing it, right? Because you need to get like 3 million chips per year in order to 3.3 million chips per year for 3 years to get to 10 million, right?
Right.
So
And to your
there's
point,
time stuff there. Yeah,
and to your point, you could mix your energy sources. So you could
right.
be building solar in the same area, or you could be these new SRMs, small SN,
Small modular reactors,
small
SMRs.
modular reactors. When they start coming on board, maybe 3 years from now, maybe you be the first guy to start, implementing
Right.
those or something
But the
like that.
small modular reactors,
Takes a lot of
because they're
them.
small, if it generates 16 megawatts or 20 megawatts, I need 50 in order to
Right.
get to a gigawatt, right?
Right.
And then basically to have a really major impact, I need to start, they're roughly the size of a
Contain.
787 Boeing plane, it's about the same level of complexity.
Hmm.
They make about 1,000 of those a year.
Hmm.
So you need a factory making 1,000 of them. I need to have a supply chain to make 1,000 of those a
Right.
year, right?
Right.
So it is again, a huge challenge in order to do. And then that's only giving you your gigawatt. If I want to get a
Yeah.
terawatt,
Right.
I need 50,000
Live of
nuclear
those.
reactors of the smaller size,
Right.
right? So it's doable. Like there's 50,000 commercial jets,
Right.
right? So it
Right.
can be done over decades. It can be done, right? But if I want to do it faster, then you have to do something even more, right? Because oh yeah, I can make a factory, I'll make 1,000 a year, blah blah blah. I'm still 50 years into getting to the number I need, mixing it with natural gas, mixing it with other stuff, and then scaling up the chips. So this huge challenge does tell us directionally. I said master plan part four.
Right.
Master plan, sometimes they take 10 years, sometimes they take 20 years, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, Elon thinking how to make those things shorter, right?
Hmm.
So I think doubling is the key.
Hmm.
A lot of fast doubling, like I said, 10 doublings. So I need to have Tesla bots making other factories and locations. The
Hmm.
issue of being able to get a whole state of, Rhode Island area of land to
Right.
do it
Hmm.
is a huge challenge. So if I'm going to do that, to me, ultimately, you're going to have to go to Mars, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because Mars, if I cover it with solar and batteries, there's water there and frozen ice. I can melt it. No one's going to say, hey, you can't take that ocean of water. Well, I just did. And then I have all these robots and factories making other factories. So one factory makes another factory, one, two, and I can have 10 doublings. How fast can I do those doublings? If it's once every 2 years, in 20 years, I have 1,000 times more. If it's
Hmm.
once a year, in 10 years, I have 1,000 times more. In 20 years, I have a million times more. If I'm doubling every 6 months, then in 5 years, I've got 1,000 times more. In 10 years, they have a million times more. So that speed of doubling determines how fast um, the construction covers the entire planet,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and how much can Mars support? Mars can support the energy and the AI data centers for about 3 trillion chips.
Hmm.
So you can get to three times, 1,000 times more. So it would be, 21, 22 doublings that you could have on Mars, just on the surface of Mars. And
Right.
then if you're doing that, you're basically going to change the solar system, right? Because I'm covering a whole planet with AI,
Right.
and then I can then mine the whole planet and start launching things and start filling out the orbit around the Earth to suck in solar power, which Elon talked about the Kardashev scale. He also talked about the Kardashev scale. Kardashev is a Russian who discussed about levels of energy. Kardashev level one is all the solar power that hits the Earth,
Right.
right? Which is it's about still 1,000 times more power, or at least 200 times more power than we make as a civilization right now.
Hmm.
So we're still, way far away from that.
Right.
If we could take all the solar power that hit the Earth, then you would have about, I think, 10 times more than you have on Mars because closer, higher solar power, other stuff. You could probably get to 30 million ships. We're not going to cover the whole Earth. You're not going to say, I'm going to, to convert the earth into, because we have our own civilization, our own houses here, the trees and that kind of stuff. You need to put this massive construction off world.
Right.
Um, but basically, the levels of stuff that we're talking about, the changes are definitely planetary scale and can soon become solar system scale things. But why do we do it is for the massive amount of superintelligence we're talking about. We're talking about in some ways, God level intelligence, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's an entire planet full of like if the scaling stuff happens, then this would be we're creating superintelligence that just keeps scaling up, getting better and better, way beyond us. But working for us, if we're doing it right. Um,
All right.
so
So, but if we're going to do it fast,
yeah,
we're not talking about going to Mars until 2 years from now, or a
yeah.
little less than 2 years now. Maybe we get the first 5 ships up or something like that to Mars. And then 2 years after that, maybe we get, 50 or something on that order. So we're looking at a decade probably before we can really start building out Mars. Whereas I think that Elon's probably thinking in less than a decade. So just let me throw a couple more ideas on the table.
Sure.
One of them was my first thought when all this took place, and one of them has nothing to do with my brain at all. Somebody else brought it to the table, and I'm going to forget who to give the credit to. But anyway, so it might have been Brian White. And that video might not have even played yet because I've got two Brian White videos that I haven't put up yet. All right. So the first one was like as soon as he announced it, the very first thing that flashed in my brain was that he has said that all the power solutions that we have on Earth today could be doubled in terms of their output, or in terms of their effective output, by putting battery storage on them. Now, if we think limited, we've got the Tesla kind of batteries. But we've also now, as I mentioned, we've got this, I think is the name of the company, EOS. I think that's the call symbol. Anyway, they're up in the Pittsburgh area now, and they're using zinc, which gives them a longer number of hours per the amount of energy that's being stored. Then we also have all these other kinds of energy storage ideas, like dropping a rock into a well, dropping a rock off the edge of a cliff. These are having water that gets pumped to the top of a cliff, and then the water comes back down and goes through, generation again. So there's a bunch of different kinds of battery storage solutions besides just the kind we naturally think of, using some kind of silicon or whatever to make a traditional style battery. So that would be one. That was the first thought that came to my mind in terms of the speed of getting to the electric supply that we would need, is using various kinds of batteries to improve, maybe double most of the current resources that we know about.
Yes, so that is a good solution because you would not have to build up the power plants. The power plants would exist. You would have to double the amount of coal, natural gas, and uranium that would go to each one because they're consuming, most of them, 85% are fossil fuels consuming um, the natural gas and the coal
Right.
in order to generate that. So you would have to, if I'm using the same ones, just running them all the time, I
Mhm.
have to double that up, which is again more doable, faster, and you can find locations where that would work. But it would be producing it all over the United States if you're doing it for the
Right.
United States, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's not like getting it to the spot I want. I have to then make a new grid to run it
Yes.
there. So,
Or
but
better
it
grid. Or
or
better
better
grid.
grid, right,
Right.
right. And
Because
then the other thing would
you've
be,
been teaching me all this, Brian, for two
yeah,
years. So I
right,
know that they're working on better grids or better
right, better grid,
wires,
right, right. And
or
then
going underground with the boring company. So if we
yeah,
could come up with a clever national scheme
mhm,
to do the most limited amount of boring underground with the proof rock 3, 4, 5, whatever,
mhm,
uh, to create some new tunneling to put these wires and better wires, but
mhm,
underground as opposed to overground. Now all of a sudden you get a lot of efficiencies out of that as well, and it'd be kind of like creating the very first interstate highway system, is the top-down analysis of how to build that out.
right. So I would say under the optimal conditions, 7 to 8 years for each of the powers of 10.
Mhm.
So 7 years to get to 10 gigawatts under ideal
Mhm.
conditions
Mhm.
could take 10 years, right?
Mhm.
And then getting to 100 gigawatts would take another 8 to 10 years to get there. So then the 10-year lag to do Mars is actually
Ah,
not that bad.
okay.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
then the fact, and also I think the challenges of getting to 1,000 gigawatts on Earth
Mhm.
um, prevent you from doing it. That you can't get it all into one location. The cooling river, all
Oh,
that
all
kind
in
of
one
stuff,
location. Right, right.
all one
Okay.
location,
Now,
right?
so now let me bring up, I think it was Brian White's idea, and that would be, this is with regard to solar, because you also taught me,
Yeah,
and that's what I think he and I were discussing, is that having the Optimus robots installing the solar would dramatically drop the cost of installing the solar.
right,
Brian, and I think it was Brian White said, yes, why wouldn't you also modularize the solar like you've modularized the pumps? I don't want to call them pumps. What are we calling these? The individual charging units at the charging locations are now modularized into sets of four, and those are delivered as a module and put on the ground,
right.
uh, at the location. So if you modularize the solar setups,
Yeah.
and then you brought those in on flatbeds or whatever to the location, and
Mhm.
you had the robots to unload them and put them in place.
Yeah.
It seems like that combination might dramatically lower the cost of installing solar.
Yes, that would you would need to make updated versions of Megapacks, things that with electronics and the power transmission, as well as transformer and other things, as well as modularizing, as you said, the solar power, the panels, and then also having it deployable rapidly by Tesla bots, because that could lower costs by about 3 times. And if I can get it to go fast enough, um, so bots in the factory producing them faster, bots in the installation deploying them faster, having the technology where it just all like snaps together, where I can have loads of high power transmission going through in some kind of like tree format of the like 1,000, 10,000, a million megapacks feeding into some central thing, right? So I have to have everything just kind of like I say snap together, super easy, just plug and
Yeah,
play, ready to
yeah,
go, right?
right.
Yes. So having that technology is something that has to happen on the Tesla energy side, where more development has to occur, where you've made an updated modular grid, upgraded modular power transmission thing in order to do it, and leaning heavier on the solar and the batteries so that you don't have to double up coal around the United States or double up natural gas because those things are actually harder to do. Besides being environmentally dirty, it would
Hmm.
actually be harder because we haven't been able to increase the those energy generation things for a long, long time. And each of those would then still need grid. So if my solar and battery solution has some kind of like built-in grid thing with it, then I'm putting it all together, deploying it all in one shot. Um,
So now that makes me believe that we really need to annex Alberta, because
yeah,
that makes me believe that Alberta is the perfect location because you can use the natural gas directly into the plant.
yeah,
You can put in, you put brand new grid for just this location for the things that you're going to need the grid for. You got massive amounts of land there where you can put the solar. No
yeah.
problem finding plenty of room for the solar. Now it's a little further north, which is not going to give it as much efficiency, but it's
But
got
easier for
another,
cooling.
but it's got the great cooling because it's got the Rocky Mountains right there with all kinds of ice and snow. So you
Right.
have the amount of water that you need in order to cool these facilities. So I think we should really work on this idea of annexing Alberta because it's probably the best location for all this.
I think it could be the best location. Like I said, I think it has multiple gigawatt locations there. And and then if you had like 25 gigawatt locations, you could get your 100 gigawatts. So I think 100 gigawatts is doable within 15 years
Yep.
if you really push it, maybe 20. And then, but your 1,000, I think you really have to go to Mars in order to
Okay.
make that
Yep.
happen.
Yep.
Um, Maybe there's a way to do it on Earth. I just have trouble seeing issues to make that happen. And
Well,
there's
Brian,
also delays in terms of scaling up chips
right.
and everything else in order to make those things happen.
All right, so Brian, I'm going to give you a homework assignment because you're brilliant enough to come up with this next idea. So the next idea is You need them to be able to talk to themselves 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away as fast as they're currently talking. So you need this latency to go down so
Hmm.
that you don't have to absolutely put all the plants in exactly the same place in order to get this minimum
I
latency.
already know the answer to that,
I was gonna,
but
okay,
we
go ahead.
can save it for another video. I have the
Oh,
answer.
okay, all right.
Like, I have
You
the
don't want to
answer
give
for the
all everything
communication.
at once. Okay,
Yeah,
how to get them to communicate over distance.
right.
Yeah.
I have a
Okay.
solution for that, but we can do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, Elon, are you listening? We've got it
yeah,
all right here on the Brian and Randy channels,
right.
where you can be
Okay,
watching video on either location. Okay.
okay. So talk to you next time, and we'll
Okay.
give you the secret about how you can communicate at speed, multiple locations. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Talk next time. Bye.